Welcome to another amazing, captivating, absolutely tantalizing episode of Beyond the Truth, brought to you by the Department of Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation. I'm your host, Sydney Madibu. Be sure to follow our conversations at Mountaintop Productions on all social media platforms. Now, over the years, more and more of the world has seen itself grow more and more urbanized, with people demanding for their nations to trade more freely and remove borders. Now, the question that we're asking today, should South Africa put its interests first, or should we move more towards a borderless Africa? And as usual, we are joined by four exceptional minds walking our land today. We're joined by Mr. Bongani Frank Masilela, CEO of Simong. How are you doing, my brother?
Good, and yourself?
Awesome stuff. We're also joined by Noxolo Ntaka, Project Manager at Democracy Works Foundation South Africa, an academic and a staunch activist. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
We're also joined by the exceptional Mohale Motaung, entrepreneur, philanthropist, absolutely outstanding TV personality. Thank you so much for taking time to be with us today.
Thank you for having me.
And then we're joined by Advocate Ike Khumalo, who says that he does not want titles. The leader without a title. How's it, Advocate Khumalo?
No hush, man.
So getting straight into it, Advocate Khumalo, should we move towards a borderless Africa, or should we put the interests of South Africa first?
I think right now, at this moment, to open our borders, it will be committing suicide, because we all know what is going to happen.
What is going to happen?
What is going to happen is that the whole continent is going to move to South Africa, to Joburg, like we've seen in the past. It's always one-way traffic. It's not one-way traffic or traffic going to Senegal or Gabon. It's always people, overwhelming us here. Until African countries, they have fixed themselves and they have displayed, that they're human enough, to be united with. Because in the past, we've seen when they were liberated, instead of governing themselves, they were butchering each other, raping women, killing babies, and blaming the West. For the last 70 years, they're still blaming the West. So for me, I don't think that we need to unite with the whole of the continent now.
As you are giving your response, I can hear Bongani breathing heavily behind me.
It's okay.
Itching to give a response or a reaction.
He can breathe as heavy as he wants to. But I'm telling you right now, I'm saying that as South Africans, we should put our interests first, like everybody else is putting their interests first. Zimbabwe puts Zimbabwean first. Robert Mugabe said retail work is for Zimbabweans. Nigerians, they're putting their own people first. They're employing Zimbabweans. They are protecting their small business. Gabon is doing the same. Ghana is doing the same. It's only African people or South Africa here where we're supposed to open our borders. And everybody's closing their borders. And it doesn't mean if we're trading with the rest of the world, we must open our borders and allow, these African countries to dump their people here, to dump their grandmothers, to dump their hobos, their mad people here. We are trading with Japan. Do you see Japan here? We are trading with Germany. We've got German cars here. Do you see Germans here?
Bongani, if we were to open our borders, everyone would dump everything and everyone here. Those are the remarks of Advocate Khumalo. What do you make of them?
I think, so while I hear what the advocate's saying, that argument or that idea comes from South African exceptionalism. This idea that South Africa is a beacon in the African continent, and we're in a very unique place to host migrants and people who are looking for opportunities, as if there aren't countries like that across the African continent. So the idea of South African exceptionalism is very similar to American exceptionalism, where if you live in America, you're convinced that it's the best country in the world and that everyone wants to move there. But if you ask someone in Europe, they'd say, I actually prefer to live in a country that has good healthcare, education, blah, blah, blah. Same thing in Africa, right? The only thing South Africa really has is, it's a great country and I'm patriotic and I love this country, but having amazing roads and Spur and DSTV doesn't necessarily mean that we are the beacon that everyone wants to run to. There are many countries in Africa who have their infrastructure and policies in place that attract more migrants than South Africa does. In fact, South Africa is not even number one in terms of migrant acceptance across the African continent. There are countries like the Ivory Coast, who have a higher number of migrants than we do. Countries like Kenya, who have a higher number of migrants than we do, as well as Nigeria and Tunisia. So the argument that's everyone would come to South Africa is completely false because one, we don't have all of our things in order. We're actually not the most attractive country on the African continent. We have crime problems. We have gender-based violence in South Africa, which is among the highest in the world. So I highly doubt that a woman who's thinking of moving to any country with opportunities, first option is South Africa. Maybe they would end up coming here, as we've seen, but I don't think that we're exceptional enough to be the country that will accept the most migrants.
Before you disagree with him, Advocate Kumar, I just want to get a reaction quickly from Mohale. Mohale, you are an entrepreneur. You work with young people. You work with different organizations. Is there any form of opportunity for us if we were to open up the country and say, hey, South Africa is open to all, come through?
Look, I don't think now is the right time to do this. And I'm saying that because there has been a whole lot of things that have happened in Africa where we now have had to carry some of them on our shoulders. Because, I mean, our GDP is good, we've got great minerals and whatsoever. But I don't think it's the right time. We still have a lot of issues that we need to fix as a country before we can just open our borders. And looking at what's happening in the government, looking at our youth unemployment, which is now over like 50%, it's a lot of things that we still need to fix because we don't know what's going to happen when these people start coming into the country. And I agree with Bongani with him saying that, I mean, South Africa is not the most attractive country. Even in literacy, even in tourist attraction, there's a whole lot of other countries in Africa that are great. But I'm just worried about what's going to happen when we open our borders without having fixed the issues that we have in the country. So maybe not now. I think it's a good idea, but not now. And I say this also because if I am a parent, I would like to make sure that my kids are well fed, are okay before I say to them, okay, I've done my job, go out into the world.
Nokolo, Eskom is already battling to give us electricity. Schools are dilapidating in the country. People are jobless. So many different challenges. If you're a woman coming from Gabon or Uganda, would South Africa be your go-to place? What's your take on putting South Africa first?
I think putting South Africa first is not mutually exclusive to looking towards a borderless Africa. And I say this because if you look at last year, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, most African countries signed onto it, and so did South Africa. And I think there are benefits that come with trading within Africa that we will not be able to leverage from the rest of the world. If you look at, economically speaking, a lot of African countries are charged extensively for importing from Western countries. And I think that a free trade agreement like what has been trying to be set up is looking to unify Africa from an economic perspective so that the continent is able to advocate better for itself when it meets other countries like your Germanys, like your Englands, like the United States. So I don't think it's completely mutually exclusive. When I think about the free trade agreement, it's looking towards, one, removing the tariffs amongst each other, which is a huge economic benefit if you look at that regard. And it's also looking to ensure more movement within the continent. I think for me, it doesn't make sense that a flight ticket to Ghana is the same equivalent of flying to the UK. And that's why you don't have movement, because there's no benefit for Africans. And I think that there are strong economic benefits and also principles in that regard for actually advocating for a much more integrated Africa. And just to speak on Mohale's point, for me, my question is, if we say we have all of these issues that South Africa is facing, till when are we going to keep saying the government needs to fix it? Because this has been an ongoing situation for the past 25, 26 years.
Do you think we'll ever be able to reach a point in time where we do eventually solve these problems?
Probably in 2,000 years from now. And I'm telling you this, most people, they confuse free trade, lowering down tariffs or doing away with tariffs and with movement. We can trade. Like I have said earlier on, you can trade as well as we've been trading with Israel during apartheid. We've been trading with Japan. We've been trading with England. there's no problem with that. Tariffs maybe should be looked into. But the problem, it's when people start moving, as they are moving right now, with no passports, illegal immigrants. And South Africa, the last time I checked, it is the highest in the world, which welcomes foreigners, which welcomes fake refugees coming here after United States. And the idea that we are not the best in the world, it's lies. I mean, I can show you statistics during apartheid, people coming here in an apartheid South Africa, when they were supposed to be liberated, they were coming here to Baragwanath. Baragwanath, 1996, I think it was declared the biggest hospital in the world. People used to come from UK to come to our hospitals. But right now, the very same people whom we are told that they are advanced, they are educated, when they're pregnant, they jump the border. They come here from Zambia, to access what we have built during apartheid. What were they doing all this time? I mean, I can show you statistics during apartheid. Who's the bigger star than Yvonne Chagachak? Who's the bigger star than Miriam Makeba, than Letambul? Who's the bigger soccer player? I mean, soccer players were produced during apartheid. I can show you Jomoson, Esinzweleng. I can show you musicians. I can go even from technology, what we have produced, militarily, what we have produced, where we were. Compared to these guys who were free long time ago. So for me, I'm saying South Africans, we should be prioritized in this country, and we should make sure that we are protected, give ourselves jobs. Yes, we can trade, with Zimbabwe, we can trade with Ghana, but their free movement, I don't think it's to our advantage, because right now I'm driving, I see mad people, I see people in the street asking for monies, and people who are coming here, they are not adding value. They're not adding, they have nothing to offer, power roll. They're competing with our people. They want the same toilets, they want the same houses.
Do they have nothing to offer? Braik is sending chills down the spine. They're cringing, itching to give a response.
You see an open park, they just come in there, they put in tents, shacks. You go to Deep Slot.
Yeah.
I mean, you go to Durban now. You go to the CBDs of Durban. They have messed up our towns. I mean, back in the days, during apartheid, the chicken will fall flat on the
let's get a quick reaction, Braik, so that the conversation can flow and run smoothly. Braik yakhala, mad women, mad people, hobos. What do we make of it?
Dealing like we have seen now.
Yeah.
I think there's an inherent assumption that issues around criminality, drug dealing, have come with foreigners.
Where do Nigerians work?
Well, these are issues that have long existed. Criminality in South Africa. South Africa is the highest rape capital. It is also the highest in crime. These are not issues that came suddenly with foreign nationals that came to the country. And secondly, I think that this conversation is a little bit skewed because we are speaking about foreign African nationals coming to steal our jobs when actually we have a system that we inherited from apartheid, which is the reason why a lot of black South Africans don't have power, economic power. So I kind of see the fact that we are scapegoating, using foreign nationals as scapegoats to actually blame the state of South Africa and where it is currently.
So I'd like to ask you a question. Do you think if we were to do away with every foreign national that is in the country, don't you think things would be a tad better?
Would criminality disappear?
I think criminality, yes. We can talk about criminality, but we can't, like he said, look at Hillbrow. You go into Hillbrow, they have taken over. So I'm saying if we were to take each and every foreign national out of Hillbrow, out of CBD, out of Durban CBD, out of Deep Sloot, don't you think things would be a bit better for South Africans?
So you think there would be there would be more functionality and we'll be able to solve some problems quicker? Kungani, you're shaking your head.
Absolutely not. And the reason why I disagree with that is, there's this perception that, and this isn't just a South African problem. All around the world, people are afraid of immigrants because they assume that immigrants bring crime with them into the country and so on and so on, right? If you take a look at countries that accept more refugees and migrants than we do, even in Europe, crime rates haven't necessarily gone up. The reason for that, as Nox has correctly pointed out, if you adopt an economic system that is built on inequality, right? And you experience a 1994 like we did, and you don't radically transform the way that the economy looks, what that means is that there will always be, there's a large economy with a small number of players and a small economy with a large number of players. The majority of black South Africans participate in the small economy with a large number of players. Refugees and foreign nationals also operate in that economy, which means resources are scarce and there's a lot of competition. So when you see things like crime, it's not because someone is a foreigner that they're committing a crime, it's because of inequality. The same way that a South African in Durban might commit crimes, the same way that a South African in Cape Town might commit crimes. Because we have problems, I mean, you may as well start making racialized arguments about removing the Cape Flats, right? Removing Alex, removing areas where poor people live, where oftentimes they commit crimes not because they want to, but because of the way that the economy is structured. So I really think that we need to take away this assumption that foreign nationals bring crime, because in countries where socioeconomically they're a lot better off, refugees don't bring crime with them because there are economic opportunities and the economy is structured in such a way that the masses and the poorest of the poor are able to get dignified jobs and are able to be taken care of.
Refugees don't bring crime with them.
I have a problem with this notion.
Inequality brings crime.
Whenever South Africans start saying that, majority of the foreigners, they bring crime here, we are also told that South Africans also do crime.
Yes.
Imagine if women are crying about rape, being raped by men, being vandalized, being brutalized. Then I say women also brutalize men. I'm watering down, the legitimate concerns of those people. And I will tell you this, majority of the people who are defending this borderless Africa, they always speak of refugees. We don't have refugees in this country. If they are here, they are probably 1%. Who are the refugees? Because when you ask, is there a war in Botswana? Is there a war in Gabon? Nothing. And majority of those things, problems that they're experiencing, they are self-inflicted. They are not governing their countries the way they're supposed to be governing. And prior to 1994, we've never had Pedi Mafia, Tswana Mafia, Zulu Mafia. Today, you look into our country, we've got Cyprus Mafia, Israeli Mafia, Nigerian Mafia, Pakistani Mafia, Bread Mafia. What nonsense is that? We've never had that. You've got new crimes that you've never had, like our girl children being abducted for prostitution. Go to our CBDs. People, taking off their jewelries. I mean, you find Zimbabweans criminals, 10 people against one, grabbing one person in a small street, in Johannesburg. You've never had that prior to 1994. When we open up our borders, we did not attract the people that we thought that we were going to attract, artisans, people with skills. We attracted criminals. It's the same concern that Donald Trump is complaining about. That when we open up borders, Mexicans started coming, gangbangers, and then we can't fold our arms and say nothing when that is happening under the name of brotherhood. South Africans, they've been fighting foreigners since 1652. It doesn't matter whether foreigner or invader, he looks like me, we will still oppose. If someone comes here, establish nonsensical churches, fake schools, we'll still oppose. I'm not going to keep quiet because whoever is perpetuating those crimes looks like me.
Mohale, I see you nodding. I'm wondering if you're nodding in agreement. There's always this argument that, before 1994, when our political leaders were in exile, they were housed in other African countries and we should open up our hearts and open up South Africa. What do you make of that statement or that comment?
I think things were very different back then. I think right now also the state of our economy, I mean, looking at our GDP, which is good after Nigeria, but I think inherent within the government, there's things which they would like to allow because it benefits them. And they are not thinking of Tapelo, who is in Alexandria, who knows nothing about what's going on. And I really would like to advocate for young people who are growing up, who don't really maybe make of anything of what is going on, or who don't understand what is going on. So they've housed us. Yes, it was great, but that was a different time. And right now, I think we should be looking at how are we going to move South Africa forward in a different way, in a better way, before it happens. You see, for me, I'm not saying it shouldn't happen, but I'm saying it's not the right time.
The moment is not opportune.
No,
it's
at
not
all.
the right time.
And we must correct that notion that they housed us. 2 people moved into exile.
Yeah.
15 million people are coming here saying we helped you. And how many countries did help us? Somalia could not have helped us. They were fighting from day one. Nigeria, they were fighting their Biafra wars from day one. Majority of these countries, when they were liberated, they were fighting to have helped us. Zimbabweans, they've expelled us. Swaziland expelled us. Maputo, we were expelled. In Botswana, it was very, very, very hostile country. Many PAC cadres were arrested there. Majority of these countries, they expelled us. Today, they are opportunistically with their parasitism coming here saying we've helped you during apartheid. They did not help us Bogorol.
The blood boiling in your bloodstream wants to get something out.
Firstly, I think it's false to say that maybe 2 countries helped us. There's documented paperwork that definitely shows that MK soldiers were housed in many African countries, especially those that gained independence prior to South Africa. But what I actually want to touch on, I think that there's an element of a racialized discussion when we speak about foreign nationals, because who is the foreign national that you're speaking about? It's black foreign nationals. So those are the people that South Africans are saying they need to go. And I kind of wonder whether or not that this is the wrong fight, because you have foreign national companies, you have expats, white expats who come into the country who don't receive the same treatment, yet wealth is concentrated there. So
I mentioned
are we,
1652.
so
that's a lie.
no. So what I'm saying, are you sure that we're fighting the let me finish. I don't think we're fighting the right fight, because South Africa's inequality stems from big business. It stems from the fact that white wealth is still concentrated in a minority. So my question then becomes, why is it sold that foreign black African nationals are to blame for South Africa's already existing inequality?
Let us cure that myth.
Bongani, there's this huge challenge, especially in townships. I think you would recall that whenever there's a service delivery protest, or whenever there's any protest of any sort, shop owners, Somalian shop owners or Ethiopian shop owners have their shops looted and torched and all of the likes. And once they move out of that township or out of that location, then there's this big void where you can't get access to certain basic goods that you need. And it's always backed up by a slogan or comment that I want to get your views on, that South Africans are just pure darn lazy. What do you make of that?
So I disagree with the idea that South Africans are lazy entirely. I reject it, because oftentimes the people who say that South Africans are lazy, that's why foreign nationals are taking their jobs, are people who want South Africans to work for an undignified wage, and people who think that South Africans deserve undignified jobs without healthcare and all of those benefits. So we need to get rid of the argument that says South Africans are lazy, because oftentimes it comes from middle-class people who, in their hearts, feel that poor people don't struggle enough. So we really need to get rid of that entire myth that South Africans don't work hard enough. I think you can have an argument about South Africans deserving better jobs and economic opportunities, whilst at the same time crediting, let's say, a Somali shop owner, right? I've been working with a lot of them a lot of shop owners, both South African and foreign nationals as of late. And what I found is that, for example, Somali shop owners, they just tend to have a better, system of community purchasing and shared logistical networks and all of those things. So at that point, it's not necessarily that they are working harder than South Africans. There's just a sense of community that helps them to be able to run their businesses a lot better. But it's not a reflection. It's not a moral deviance on the part of South Africans. And it's certainly, I wouldn't paint South Africans in that light at all.
Mohale, Nokolo makes an interesting point that whenever we talk about foreigners or people that come from other countries, we always seem to concentrate it more towards their blackness. And we don't mention anything about the Portuguese, the Spanish. What do you make of that? Do you think that we've racialized it? Do you think that when we talk about foreigners, we are not giving a very objective view to it? Is it leaning more towards one end? What's your take on that?
I think we don't really racialize it. I think we question how certain people, and I'm talking about all of them, how certain people either got into the country, and when they came to the country, what were they saying they are coming to do here? Because, when I look at a lot of white people, so I used to be a recruitment specialist, And I would work with a lot of foreign nationals who are coming into the country for work. And they have all of their papers, they work permits, they go to the embassy and follow all of the right rules for them to come and say, I am here for a 6-month job as a specialist at a bank, and then after that I'm going. But with other foreign nationals that come into the country, we want to question, okay, how did you get here? What are you here to do? You know, so it differs with each and every foreign national that comes into the country.
Before that, you mentioned spaza shops, the Somali and Pakistani spaza shops. It is an insult to South Africans that we are fighting over spaza shops. You know, we didn't struggle and liberate this country to own spaza shops so that you can sleep 60 people in one spaza shops. We want economic transformation. And South Africans, they've been fighting since 1652. People who came here, 1652, they were not Nigerians. They were not Somalis. They were not from Zimbabwe. When people say we want inclusion into the banking sector, into the mining sector, we are not targeting Nigerians. These are white people. The Dutch East India Company, it was a Jewish-owned company. It came from Europe, via Holland. It's a white company. So to say that we are targeting black foreigners, it's a lie, because we want economic inclusion, and it is in the hands of white people. But what you are complaining about is the nonsense that is coming since 1994, yesterday, when people violate our labor laws, they violate our business laws, they violate our immigration laws and come here to overburden us. That we can't, keep quiet to.
Pulses are racing, arteries are popping, bloodstreams are high, and people are sweating. You're still watching Beyond the Truth. More of this after the break.
General amadoda pay attention siyavuma phakamisa i-general aid la nganandoda yaqanga seyiqoma i-general aid udalani mokusenza ngibizona naso ndimo khupha imela asentshonalanga zigcina ndimo yonke into yasentshonalanga igcinwa ndimo so zazinto zigcinwa ndimo umuntu kodwa azahlake imela ezakuphuma phaa kum.
The entire prison institution is dominated by these so-called 26, 27, and 28 gangs. No matter which prison you visit in South Africa, you will always find these 3 gangs. They managed to endure the years and to this day maintain a tight network over vast lands and cities. These 3 gangs have forged a close relationship for power sharing against other gang domination. Since these gangs were established within prisons, a prison culture was inherited. A culture that fast became barbaric and made prisons notorious for violence and hostile behavior. These gangs then created a new prison language to safeguard their activities and protect their codes and secrets.
Welcome back. You're still watching Beyond the Truth. Now, remember to follow the conversation on our social media pages at Mountaintop Productions and give your piece of the truth. Before the break, Ike, you were talking about how we are insulting South Africans if we say to them that their struggle, what they are fighting at the moment is far more than just Somali spaza shops. Do you at any point think, what's your take on, when you advocate for a South Africa for South Africans and you get a backlash with statements on xenophobia or Afrophobia?
I don't care what people call me. They have got the right to call me whatever that they call me. But to say that put South Africa first, it doesn't mean that you are anti anybody else. Same way, when you say Black Lives Matter, it doesn't mean that you are anti-white. You are only prioritize your own people, which is normal. Any species and every species, in the animal kingdom, it prioritizes itself. So with us, what's wrong with us when we prioritize ourselves? When we want our youth to be working. I mean, you go to the townships, our youth are not working. They're out of jobs, and you can't smile. Our CBDs have been taken over. There's crimes in CBDs. You can't access our CBDs. Housing, we've got problems of housing. Wrongful people are occupying those houses. At hospitals, we've got problems. You can't even secure an appointment to see an orthopedic. You'll be told that next year in front of you. There are people who are not supposed to be here. We came here illegally.
Let me bring Bongani into the conversation. So every single time when there are those protests that we spoke about earlier on, you know, the looting and the killings and the violence, it is always attributed to the fact that these people are taking our jobs. What do you make of that?
Look, I agree with Ike in saying that by wanting to prioritize South Africans, we shouldn't stigmatize people who, you know, if you look around your community at any given point, we all have 3-4 cousins who are unemployed right now, right? We all know someone who isn't experiencing the benefits of one of the largest economies in Africa. However, as far as the whole, you know, taking out jobs issue, I think I'm going to make more case studies about this. But if you look at, for example, the Ivory Coast, which accepts a huge number of immigrants from Burkina Faso who contribute a lot to the Ivory Coast, the average unemployment rate in countries like the Ivory Coast and Senegal, most of whose immigrants don't come to South Africa, right? We don't have a lot of Francophone immigrants in South Africa. Unemployment rates in those countries is sitting at about 5-6%, despite the fact that a significant portion of people who live in the Ivory Coast are immigrants from Burkina Faso. So it goes back to this idea that immigration isn't the problem. Even in Africa, even with countries that aren't as wealthy and as developed as South Africa, there's still an instance where they proportionately accept more immigrants than we do, and yet the unemployment rate is at 6%. And the reason for that is simply because of the way that the economy is structured. Yes, the country is poorer, but there's less inequality in most West African countries compared to South Africa. So if we don't deal, and Noxie already pointed this out, the structural issues of the economy, it doesn't matter whether we have immigrants or not, people will still end up being poor. I mean, during apartheid, right, when immigration levels were much lower than they are now, people did have jobs. But if you look at the type of jobs that people had, these were jobs where if you were a mine worker who all of a sudden caught TB, right, the mine could fire you with no recourse. So that's not a quality job. That's just you being used as a tool. So this example of, oh, but we had jobs back, you know, when immigrants weren't allowed and now we don't have jobs is completely false. Because if you look at the way that black people were treated in apartheid, if those are the types of jobs you want to prioritize and say, let's give black people the jobs that they had in apartheid, I think, yeah, we're misconstruing the idea of empowering South Africans. But secondly, immigration in and of itself is not the problem. It's the structure of the economy. And
Mohale, we always attribute the drug problem that drugs in the country commonly are brought in by foreigners, and you look at our CBDs and challenges that we have there. But is it a problem brought by foreigners, or is it a supply-demand problem, right? If there wasn't a need for the product, I wouldn't need the product.
Sure. I think it could be both ways. Excuse me. Because I'd like to think there were drugs being sold in South Africa and it happening before even foreign nationals came. It's just that because when we look at, for example, Nigerians, we match them to them being that. And therefore, when we see any Nigerian in the country, we think drugs. And I think for me, the issue around drugs is there's been drugs in South Africa. In the Cape Flats, people have been using drugs. It's nothing new. So that I wouldn't really want to attribute to foreign nationals, because I mean, also there is demand for the product, like you say. So people are wanting to use it, and it's not that Nigerians or anyone from outside is saying, hey, use it. They're the ones who want it. Yeah.
Let's bring the conversation here a bit, not forward. There we are, years down the line, we decide that, hey, you know what? This is actually a good idea. Open up the borders, open up trade, we do all these things. People can move around freely as and when they wish. What does this new Africa look like? How do we imagine it? What do we make of it?
So I think when we speak about a new Africa, I think the continent itself is unable to progress because of each country's internal issues with regards to corruption. And this is not mutually exclusive to South Africa. With regards to corruption, with regards to patronage, with regards to holding on to power, with regards to not putting enough effort in terms of the AU trying to become a continental bloc that is a force to be reckoned with when it comes to negotiating with the West. So I think for me, which is why I said that a borderless Africa will only work if African governments are willing to put in the work around sorting out issues of immigration, sorting out issues of trade, sorting out issues of protectionism. And so, which is why I think it is unfair to then only solely blame African nationals who come to South Africa for the issues that we currently face. These things existed before 1994, they existed in 1994, rape existed, crime existed, the inequality, wealth gap existed. And so we can't use foreign nationals as scapegoats. What we should be doing is actually holding African governments accountable, because there are countries in the continent that have gained independence for over 50 years. And the question is, what have those governments between then and now done to ensure?
In those 50 years?
Yes.
Still grappling with corruption, still grappling with inequality, with poverty.
With inequality, with poverty, inheriting a colonial system that they perpetuated. And so I think really free trade integration in Africa is possible. But it's only possible if the continent and governments are able or willing to put in the work when it comes to that. So that when we speak about an African passport, when we speak about free movement, it's a possibility, and it's not something that we foresee in the future. And I don't think we can keep on delaying it and say, not now. You know, government needs to be held accountable in that regard.
Before we go to Ike, Bongani, is it possible for African governments to clean up their act? So much power, so much money, so much influence.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm a proponent for a borderless Africa as soon as possible. The reason why I say that...
Even if we wake up tomorrow.
If we wake up tomorrow, we have to... And I'll tell you why we have to sort it out. If you look at, for example, other borderless societies around the world, I'll make an example with the European Union, which is the most famous one, so for obvious reasons, right? After World War II, the European Union was probably, many countries in Europe were in worse off situations than many countries in Africa are right now, right? Poverty, infrastructure had been dilapidated, people, you know, healthcare was a mess, education was a mess. Some of the most developed countries today in the 1940s and 50s were factually poverty-stricken countries, right? France wasn't what it is now. Neither was Germany, neither was the UK. So this is a chicken and egg argument. Do you first sort out your mess and then open up the border, right? Do you first build wealth and blah, 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 and economic development, then open up the border? Or do you open up the borders as a way of amassing wealth through trade, through skills transfers, and all of those things? The European Union is the best case study for opening up the borders before you get to a point where you're wealthy enough and ready enough to develop.
So we solve the problems as we go.
You solve the problem when you've integrated your institutions. So the European Union for a very long time wasn't willing to allow Spain and Portugal into the European Union because they weren't democratic, right? The only thing they wanted them to sort out is sort out democracy. If your people are poor, it's fine. Join our trading bloc, allow your people to move freely, and as a result, we'll build wealth.
Yeah, but the European Union, they're having troubles and problems with the borderless continent. If you look into the question of migrants moving from Syria, north of Africa, going to France, Donald Trump is doing the same, you know, defending jobs that are taken by Mexicans, jobs that belongs to Afro-Americans who are the indigenous of America, but today, you know, they are the third minority. And I have a feeling that this borderless continent, it only applies to us. It's only South Africa that is xenophobic. When other people are doing exactly, putting their countries first, they're not termed xenophobic. Nigeria does the same. Kenya does the same. Zimbabwe does the same, protecting jobs for locals. Congo doing the same. And nobody's crying that, you know, they are backward, they want to protect their borders. It's only us here. And I have a problem with this borderless Africa. Like, for an example, my sister mentioned crime. I mean, the magnitude of the crime. Yes, I grew up in the 70s. I've never seen people being raped in town. There are buildings there that you can't occupy. They are called Mnyamandao. Women being dragged in town. You know, drug dealers.
Are they being dragged?
Drug dealers in Small Street, in Bree Street. You know, 9-9, without hiding themselves. I've never seen something like that.
Right, when you mention places such as Mnyamanda or Nyaupe and all of these other challenges, is it not a reflection of the inability of government to enforce the law? And shouldn't we then be holding the government accountable as opposed to squarely putting the blame on foreign nationals?
I can also blame foreigners because they also create the very same demand that you mentioned. They're products that never existed anywhere else in the world that are new. You first advertise them, you create, that appetite, like drugs, you get addicted. Then from there, you've got demands. But when it comes to the officials, like the ANC, you'll remember that the majority of these guys who are in government today, they left the country when they were teenagers, 14, 15. They lived in the so-called fake exile for years, in camps, by the way. They were not gallivanting like we see foreigners are doing here. They lived in camps. So when they come here, they have never seen a functioning Joburg. They've never seen a functioning Cape Town. They think it's the same thing. So technically, the ANC are foreigners, because they have never seen, they become so surprised when you say, Johannesburg used to be so clean. They say, what are you talking about? Because they've never seen it. They're used to Bujumbura, they're used to Malawi. That's why Jacob Zuma, when he came here, he says our roads are not Malawi, because he was surprised himself. He says, these roads are not like Malawi, it's not like you're in Zimbabwe. So these guys, when they came here, they dropped the ball. It became the race to the bottom because, it was going to be something if they were in exile in Norway, they were in exile in Canada. At least they'll come with higher standards. So they are coming with bad local standards. They have adopted bad tendencies from these countries of the Idi Amin
Before
country.
we shoot to Mahali, let me get quick reactions from Bongani and Nakolo. Before they came back, while they were in exile, the standard on which they placed South Africa was already low because they've never seen better. What's your reaction to that?
Look, I disagree entirely. I hear what he's saying in a sense that a lot of leaders left the country and came back without the proper governance skills to be able to run our cities and countries and so on. But I don't think it's a standard problem necessarily. A lot of these countries in the 60s and 70s were incredibly well developed. If you watch videos of African capital cities in the 60s and 70s, they were incredible. Infrastructure was great, roads were great, and so on. There's another reason why infrastructure deteriorated. That's a separate argument that has to do with World Bank loans and things like that, right? So, but secondly, there are many African countries whose infrastructure has dilapidated, whose leaders were in exile in the UK and France, but because of their own corruption, ended up deteriorating their infrastructure in their countries. So I don't think it's an issue of which country you were in. Some leaders were in Sweden. They were in Sweden. Many leaders were in the States. Some of them were in Germany, if I'm not mistaken, Belgium, and so on. So that's not really the issue. I don't think we should blame the quote-unquote lower standards in other African countries and our leaders being exposed to that for why Joburg looks the way it does. Because if you went to Mexico, they have the same problem. Did Mexican leaders go to Malawi and Uganda and live in Bujumbura? I don't think so. I think it's an issue of government.
Maybe they did.
They did.
Let me bring it to Mahali a bit. Mahali, so every single time when there are fights and protests and when there are arguments against a borderless Africa, against free travel, against free movement, Nakolo mentioned earlier that it always seems as if it's racialized, and we've never seen people go and looting Portuguese butcheries or Spanish shops or Italian cuisines or anything like that, right? Are South Africans Afrophobic? Is our fear or our hatred for other Africans that strong that we're not even willing to challenge Spanish, Italian?
I think it also goes back to who we are as a country and what we know and what we're used to. We come from an era of apartheid where we have been taught that a white person is right, a white person does great. So it's in our DNA to think that if anything is wrong and we are talking about foreign nationals, they must be black. And it's a very big problem because there could be a lot of white foreign nationals who are also in South Africa illegally, who we should also be asking the same questions we are asking a person from Tanzania or whatever the case might be. But we are not because of what we are used to.
Because of this deeply rooted mentality that we have that if it's white, it must be right, right? That's what we assume. Finally, just before we get to our conclusion, I just want to put this out, right? Whether we go borderless, whether we go free trade, whatever decision it is we take, Africa in general, South Africa and any other African country, has this huge problem of fraud, corruption, looting, right? Will it change in any way if we put South Africa first, or if we go borderless? If we have this amazing United States of Africa, does that simply change the conscience of leaders to say, I'm tired of stealing, no more. I want to be a good person now? I think we'll start with Bongani, end up with Braik.
Okay. Do I think it'll change? I don't think it'll change overnight necessarily, but because the incentives definitely will change. What comes with a borderless society is this idea that you're no longer, I think if you're looking out for yourself, that's where corruption tends to thrive the most, because there's a lack of accountability and oversight, right? The more that the United States tracks back on its agreements with countries around the world, the more corrupt they're becoming, because now they're less and less and less and less accountable. Same thing in Europe. The more that the UK tracks back from the EU, the more they're able to get away with their own things, because there's not that oversight from France saying, hey, your human rights record, your economic policies, your what, something's wrong there.
So you sweep it under the carpet.
You sweep it up because you're alone and you're not accountable to anyone. So if anything, I do think a borderless Africa that obviously comes with institutions that need to govern that borderless Africa will bring about better oversight, right? Will bring about better governance, because you're accountable to more than just yourself. At a point where immigrants from another country are living in, let's say, Botswana, and Botswana has a horrible record on human rights, those countries now start to get involved in the internal affairs of Botswana and their human rights record or their economic policies. That oversight does end up developing. And the example I made with Europe is the same. When you integrate, no one wants to see their citizens being abused, and no one wants to see this continent dying out as a result of corruption. So I do think that opening up the border brings necessary oversight from other countries who are able to hold us accountable to certain standards.
You know, I think there's a long-standing argument about the fact that the state of African countries is the way it is because of colonialism. I think there comes a time where we need to stop blaming colonialism, especially when we've had African leaders for as long as they've been in power for. And, you know, it begs the question then to say, after independence, why is the state of Africa the way it is when it comes economically, when it comes socially, when it comes politically? And it all boils down to an inherited system that was perpetuated, where governments are still putting people that they know, forming networks, not plowing money into developing countries. And this is South Africa included, because we ourselves have corruption in the country. So I think that we can't use the issue of foreign nationals as an excuse to say that, you know, they are the reason why South Africans don't have jobs. We are already eating crumbs, if we must put it like that, you know, because of an inequality and a system that has been so designed, that has been inherited and has not been changed. And I also want to say that, you know, it's very ironic for us as South Africans to want to say that foreign nationals must leave. But if you look at South Africa Inc., your big businesses are in West Africa. So your FNBs, your Ackermans, your Pick n Pays, your ShopRites have entrenched themselves. And there's an argument to be made there about even those nationals complaining about the fact that South Africa has made itself so exceptional that it's also exploiting other African countries. So then my question becomes, who are we then to say, you know, foreign nationals shouldn't be in the country, foreign nationals being crime, foreign nationals, if we are also perpetuating exploitation in some form or another?
So they should leave, everyone should leave. Does everyone then leave? Does the ShopRite leave? Does the Pick n Pay and the FNB leave? Mohali, so earlier on we mentioned, you know, that borderless Africa, now's not the time. But while we wait and wait, millions and millions go missing every single day. Government official must come up with a plan for electricity, government official puts it in his pocket. It happens every single time. Very recently we had COVID-19, there were reports that 50 billion plus rands went missing and. Now is not the time. Will we ever get to that time? With the looting spree that we see, and not the looting of Somali shops, big looting, serious things.
Look, with the government, it's a very tough one, because these are people who are in power who claim to want to take care of their people, but they're not doing it.
They take care of themselves.
Yeah, they take care of themselves. So I think, like I said earlier, inherent within the government, there are people who are thinking of themselves only. And with Africa going borderless, I think it's an amazing idea. I mean, look at Europe with the Schengen visa. You know, it's amazing because you've got a Schengen visa and you can go literally anywhere
wherever you want to go,
which is amazing, the transportation. But I just don't think that South Africa, maybe if we could elect better leaders in the future, and that's why I'm saying it should happen, but not now. But with the current state of the people who are within government, who are supposed to be taking care of us, doing what they are doing, the change into Africa becoming borderless is not going to be nice right now with the people that are working within our government.
The time is not now, Bab Kumalo.
Yeah.
I think you could say the time is never. What are your views on us eventually tackling fraud, corruption? Will that in any way help us put South Africa first?
When it comes to crime has nothing to do with maybe to say the battle between the good and bad, you know, will be eternal, you know, will be forever fighting, you know, corruption, you know, good versus bad. So for us here in South Africa, it's for us to try to govern our country the way we're supposed to, and I'm sure that African countries, they should also aspire to be like us, you know, because we've taught them so many things. She mentioned FNB, she mentioned checkers. They didn't have those things before. There's no multinational in Nigeria. Look at Nigeria, 200 million people, no multinational. It is a disgrace. So we taught them, they used to bank their money under the mattress. There's no deed office. They're written their buildings not for sale. Where have you seen that? A building written not for sale, because if we visit somewhere, somebody takes your building. So until these people from other African countries, they've displayed skills, capabilities that they are fit enough, you know, to be united with. Maybe we can consider that. But for now, you know, they must, you know, up their game, you know, maybe in 1,000 years, you know. But for now, I don't see us uniting with them, because when you open our borders, we know what is going to happen. This is not like Europe. In Europe, I don't need to go from Italy to Germany because I'm hungry, because I want to access the health care. You know, everything is like balance. If I'm in Chicago, I don't need to go to California because my province or my state doesn't provide for me. But here in South Africa, we know. Once you open your borders, we've got people, I mean teachers coming from Zimbabwe to other countries. They're willing to take nothing, you know, go to our hospitals. You know, so it's going to be 60 million people more, and we are not used to that, you know, press up, you know, we need 10 years. People must, you know, give us a chance. They've been liberated for years. We can trade with them. We can, you know, exchange goods, but it doesn't mean that they must come and dump their own people here. The same way we are trading with other countries. You know, we've got Volvo here, we've got Bentley, we've got, but you don't see, you know, the nationals or nationalities from those countries where those products come from. So we can trade, you know, it's good, you know, flight, you know, from direct flight from here to Accra. I don't have a problem with that. But the problem comes when we're supposed to relax our labor laws, we're supposed to relax our business laws, people coming in here and we don't know what they're gonna do. We must vet them.
In closing, for our viewers at home, quickly in 5, 10, 15 seconds, Braik, your final stance. Do we go borderless, or do we put South Africa first?
We should put South Africa first, the same way Zimbabweans are putting Zimbabwe first, the same way Nigerians are putting Nigeria first. Those companies that are there, and both MTN, they're not employing me, by the way. They're employing them, both checkers. And I cannot come from here to go to Nigeria. They'll ask me, what is it that I want? Even in jail, they ask you, what do you want? You know, whenever they want to come in and out.
Put South Africa first. Even if you have MTN in Zimbabwe, MTN is employing the Zimbabwean. quick 10, 15 seconds.
I think we should open up our borders the same way Kenya puts Rwandans first and Kenyans first, the same way Kenya puts Ugandans first and Kenyans first, the same way Nigeria puts other West Africans first. It's already happening on the continent, and South Africa is not this generous, benevolent country that's doing it alone. And as Noxie said earlier on, we're receiving so much tax money from South African companies exploiting in those countries. The least we can do is find a way to go borderless so that at least everyone is benefiting from an economic structure that benefits South Africans and not the rest of the continent. But also, so many opportunities would come from opening up borders. So that's...
Where are we?
We are not ready for a borderless Africa. Not now.
At some point.
At some point, yes.
In 1,000 years, perhaps. Nox?
I think for me, you know, it's time we leave the old argument that we're not ready. It's a question of what are we doing to hold government accountable to move towards that. And I think that, you know, Africa has immense potential to benefit from free trade, from integration, and also socially. And I think the biggest problem that we have, not just in South Africa, is the lack of implementation. We don't know how to implement things that we put on paper. And so this idea of a borderless Africa then still sits very much on principle and symbolically, because there has not been a direct effort to curb corruption, to curb networks, to ensure that we are moving towards strengthening Africa as a continent.
Do we move towards a borderless Africa? Do we put the interests of South Africa first? Are South Africans lazy, or are we just simply plainly Afrophobic? That is it from us here on Beyond the Truth. Be sure to give us your thoughts and your opinions at Mountaintop Productions by giving us your piece of truth as well. Thank you to all our panelists for joining us here today, and be sure to catch us on the next episode.